Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Prigashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, what was the game like tonight?
Well, I experienced it watching not YouTube TV stream while on my phone in an Uber on the way home. And, there was a lively back and forth between the Arizona Cardinals and the shadow of the Dallas Cowboys. There was like a second where like the Dallas Cowboys looked like they might make the game interesting. And no, that evaporated pretty quickly, actually. Never mind.
And then they didn't.
Yeah, and then they didn't.
And that was the end of that. I was not as adventurous out on the high seas to find such things. I decided to take in a nice quiet evening of not having to occasionally see Jerry Jones every quarter.
They did show him a lot, actually. That's a good point. They did show him a lot. And like Stephen A. Smith was in the box with him, so that was like part of a thing, I guess. I don't know. It was a lot.
Are they filming a buddy cop movie? Like, how exactly?
So he just did, and I don't know like why this would like show up now. I get like promotional emails about like random stuff that like is football related, right? And he just did like an interview, right? Stephen A. Smith. This is great podcast material, by the way. Yeah. He like just did an interview with Jerry Jones about something. I don't care. It's getting lost in all my other Jerry Jones related emails because it turns out when you're on one media list, you're on 10. And when you're on 10 media lists, there's a ton of Jerry Jones stuff that gets pushed to you. And like, there's like one about like Jerry Jones will never give up control of the Cowboys. And it's like, why did you film a whole HBO interview about that? Obviously. What are we doing here? Anyway, hello, welcome to Norse Code.
I'm not saying I'm rooting for death in the race behind Jerry Jones. I just would like to see him off of my TV. I am happier seeing Taylor Swift in one of the boxes at Arrowhead than seeing Jerry Jones miserable, wondering why he hasn't won a championship since the 90s in one of his luxury box in his own stadium.
Yeah, it's not a great experience. It's only kind of emboldened by the fact that he, like, you know how mad he is because you know the state of the game.
Yeah. Like, it's like, you know that, like, deep down, he's, like, real close to cursing on camera every time. And it does make my heart a little happy, but not enough. He needs to be off of TV. Especially in primetime games. And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. The Vikings defeated the Lions this last weekend, and it was, you could say, an upset based on all the predictions. Great. The Vikings won. The Lions got injured and lost.
And in addition to that, lost.
In that order, they got injured numerous times to shreds, you say, and lost. So we will be covering all of that and the mailbag as well. But before we begin, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the Discord, bonus episodes, all of that. New bonus episodes should be coming out here shortly. Special thank you to Bryce Town and DR. Those are the initials that were given for signing up over on Patreon. Thank you so much. You can also help over at PayPal, paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or norsecode.threadless.com for a wonderful selection of Norse Code merch, shirts, baby onesies. There's a tin thing you can put on a wall too for some reason. I don't know. But hats, Merry Christmas. The Arif gear is back in stock and ready to go in case you would like to be the winner of your ugly sweater t-shirt, ugly sweater party, check out Arif's face in multiple forms over at norsecode.threadless.com. Let's begin. The Vikings won. And a bit of a surprise there, but I think the bigger surprise was, you could say, the competency and the belief in JJ McCarthy, especially the final drive.
Yeah, like in addition to, of course, how well he played at the beginning of the game, how much they trusted him to help close out the game, right? Like, I think that that's a pretty important point. It was kind of like a pretty difficult game to evaluate. I had been reading what one of my friends did. I haven't actually watched the JT O'Sullivan video yet. I'm sure that that's quite good. But I hadn't read. I read one of my friends' preliminary breakdowns. I don't know if he's published anything yet, or he might go to podcast of like JJ McCarthy, and I was like trying to figure out like, how did other people take this, because I know that Yahoo's football podcast with Nate Tice and Charles McDonald, there's like a clip of that going viral that people really hated because Chuck was like, what are we doing? JJ McCarthy obviously played really poorly second, third, and fourth quarters, 48 passing yards with an interception. I can't believe it. And, I didn't come away with the thought that he played really poorly, right? But I also did come away with the thought that most of kind of the Viking-centric coverage of it overplayed how well he played, right? And so I asked, or I was looking at what this guy said, and he was like, I don't know, like JJ McCarthy played okay, and like, yeah, I guess that's maybe the best way to put it. But it just like that kind of one sentence encapsulation collapses so much of like the highs and lows, right? Of all the ways that he played well and all the ways that he played poorly. But like, we can be really happy with how that first drive and even that first quarter went. A perfect first drive. I mean, 3 dropbacks, right? But a perfect first drive, really good first quarter. And then he just kind of got like worse from there. And I would argue that what had happened was his control, right, degraded. And by that, I both mean like mechanically, his ability to kind of maintain good mechanics diminished over the course of the game. But also, I think the habits that he's trying to develop were there in the first half or in the first quarter, and those habits kind of fell away. And those habits from a non-mechanical perspective are like how long he held on to that first read, how quickly he was ready to bail. And I don't want to criticize him too much for that second thing, because there was a ton of really fast pressure that he was required to get out of or throw out of. And so that's not the criticism, but there were some occasions where his decision to get out of the pocket was actually worse than it was better, and so on. So I don't want to like overplay the struggles, right? To say he played poorly, because I think ultimately he played all right. And he played so outstandingly well in the first quarter. And like you said, the Vikings trusted him to close out in the fourth quarter, that, especially that final throw. But his final throws were enough to ensure that the Vikings had an outstanding, performance against the Lions, a team that was favored by 9.5 points. They, in the final frame, essentially had like a 10-point lead. They give up a touchdown. I'm not going to argue it was a garbage time touchdown because it was relevant to strategy. But they had played to a 10-point lead and finished with a 3-point win, so they beat expectation by like 13-ish, 12-ish points, right? So, and McCarthy played a pretty big role in that, and so I was really excited by how quickly he was getting rid of the ball on that first drive and in the first quarter. How good the accuracy was. That throw to Jordan Addison that he drops was perfect. It was ideal. Like, that's how you get the touchdown. The throw to Justin Jefferson later was fantastic. He hit, and I think Tom Brady did a pretty good. This is like probably one of Brady's better games broadcasting. I think he made a couple of mistakes as a broadcaster, but this is one of his better ones, I think. But he makes a good point about like, McCarthy is set up further to the left of the left hash when he throws all the way to an outbreaker on the right. Really impressive throw. I think it was to Justin Jefferson. And Brady was like, hey, this may not get 40 yards, but this is more difficult than a lot of those deep bombs, and it can be just as valuable given the situation that you're in to kind of hit one of those. And he's right. I mean, like being able to kind of drive that throw and hit Jefferson on the other side of the field, that's really tough to do. And he nailed that. So I want to like acknowledge all of those things, but also like he was throwing really high the second and third quarter. He was throwing behind. The interception was a product of bad ball placement, right? Like obviously you can argue that that should have been simultaneous possession, which goes to the offense. And I think there is a pretty good argument for it. There's an okay argument for like that ball having hit the ground, and so no one had control over it. Also a fine argument. I think whether or not it was actually an interception is secondary to evaluating the process that led to that situation in the first place, which was a throw that was far too behind. Was it Jordan Addison or Jalen Naylor? Far too behind the receiver.
Would have been Naylor.
Yeah. For it to be something that we would regard as like a neutral throw, right? It was a bad throw, right? And he created an interception because of it. So a lot of ups, a lot of downs. He ends up with negative EPA per dropback. Again, production measures don't tell us everything, right? But here I think they give us a good proxy for the way that he performed. A really outstanding first quarter. His EPA per dropback and his total EPA really positive. And then it just degrades over time. And one area where production metrics don't give us a good sense of like how to evaluate a play is that final throw to Naylor was perfect, right? And he has a negative EPA on that play. Now, for the most part, those even out over time, and I think his EPA per dropback in this game reflects his overall game performance, which is a huge improvement over games 1 and 2. I don't think Carson Wentz would have performed as well in the same situation. But like, you know, we do have to be aware that like sometimes these things happen where like you end up with like a negative EPA, but it was a good play and stuff like that. So yeah, the Vikings helped him out with a lot of play action, 12 play action dropbacks, I think, in this game. That extended his time to throw. Him scrambling as a result of fast hurries extended his time to throw. But when you account for that, there were still moments where he's holding onto the ball too long, inviting pressure and stuff like that. So a lot of stuff he has to fix. I don't think we're at a spot where we can say this year he will be a good quarterback. There might be 1 or 2 games where he plays well enough to say that was a good quarterback performance. But I don't think by the end of the year, based on the trajectory that he's on and his history of play and the fact that it looked like his mechanics degraded over the course of this game, I don't think at the end of the year we can say we're at a spot. I would love to be wrong about this, by the way, that we're at a spot where we can say he's a good quarterback. That is not alarming to me, that fact, right? Again, super young. Again, kind of some weird offensive line problems here. A lot of process problems that are creating a lot of issues right now. Which are detailed a little bit in terms of the questions that people asked us, but like a snap exchange problem with Blake Brandel on either an outside zone or a play action outside zone, where Brandel is too kind of ready to get into his stance. I think I've mentioned this before when I was talking about like good centers. I think I was talking about this in the context of Mason Cole. This is like years ago. Like Mason Cole is not a good center, right? And one of his issues is that he's very poor at actually snapping the ball. And the reason that a center can be bad at that, because if you take your time, right, it's actually not too difficult to aim the ball consistently at an aiming point behind you in shotgun, right? To get it like 5 yards behind you or whatever. And get it basically into the quarterback's grasp. But that's not the issue. The issue is doing that in an NFL game where your hands have to be in the right spot. And it has to happen super quickly. And like one of the things that people pay attention to is like where your elbows are when you're snapping the ball. Because if they're out, it's really difficult to put your hands in the right spot. And you have to wing the ball in really quickly or wing your elbow in really quickly, which can, if you're anticipating it, affect the flight of the ball. But you have to get rid of the ball and get your hands up in the right spot. And Brandel is still learning that, and he's still like not good at that. And so like that is like one of the more underrated kind of abilities that centers learn. And one of the things that it seems like is impacting how he's playing here. And I think in anticipation of that, you're getting that snap exchange problem. There's also process problems. And that was a Brando fault. I was talking about JJ McCarthy. I just wanted to talk about process problems, and that one came up in my head. So my bad. But we had a couple of instances where the running back and the quarterback are going in different directions. One was called out pretty well by Tom Brady on the broadcast, and he explained kind of what happened there. But there were a couple of other plays where it happened, and he did mention it. But like that can't happen, right? And that is it sounded like, based off of what Brady was saying and the way it looked. So like, football plays, especially running plays, are numbered. So, I first learning about like 38 and 39, which I think is a toss. But the first number tells you the kind of play it is. The second number tells you kind of the aiming point or the gap that you're going in. The even number or an odd number tells you if you're going to the right or to the left. And it sounds like maybe everyone else heard 14 and was it Jordan Mason heard 15 or vice versa, right? I actually don't remember which one's left and which one's right. But even is always one direction and odd is always the other. And that created a problem there, right? And that is just an issue of relaying the play in the huddle, right? These are all process things that don't show up in the production metrics, especially when they relate to stuff like the running game or when you scramble and generate positive yards off a scramble, that might be negative EPA or whatever. But like we look at it, we think he saved the play. And, maybe he did. But the play maybe only needed to be saved because of that process error. So I think McCarthy was playing at a higher level than he did in the Chicago game, especially for most of the Chicago game. Obviously, we remember the fourth quarter, and for the Falcons game, right? That's a great spot to be in. And it tells us that the floor that we've seen is not the expectation we should have for the rest of the year. But I don't think we're at a point where we can say he's going to be a good quarterback by the time we get to the end of the year, which in fairness, I don't think a lot of Vikings fans are kind of demanding that be the standard at this point. But it is frustrating to see like Drake May do his thing, Jane Daniels, when he's healthy, do his thing. To some extent, Bo Nix, I guess, do his thing. While all of this is kind of happening. So that's kind of where we're at. But like, man, the offensive line gave up pressure so quickly in this game. It's so annoying.
I feel like the standard at this point is JJ plays the rest of the year.
Yeah, that would help. Like if he gets hurt again, it's going to create a lot of questions about, which he wasn't really injury prone in college, right? But if he gets hurt again, boy, that's 3 injuries, man. That's not good.
It's a low bar, but it's an important one.
Yeah.
Just watching JJ McCarthy come out that first drive and just score immediately. He just sat there going, "Oh my God, Carson Wentz died for this." Like this was the sacrifice. This was the sacrifice we live in. We are now in the age of the passion of the Wentz. Like this is. This is just where we're at this point. It was remarkable. And we have a lot of JJ McCarthy stuff, especially in the mailbag. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about it now. But I do want to mention that Aaron Jones was useful this game.
Really useful.
This is notable. Notably not useful all year until this game. So I just want to make it clear. I want to compliment Aaron Jones. This was a very good game from him.
Yeah, really good. He averaged something like 9.5 or 9.8 yards a carry in the first half. There was a moment where, and I'll talk about that when we get to that question in the show notes, but there was a moment where he got a screen pass. It was initially logged as a catch and a pass, which would have helped McCarthy's statistics because it was like 31 yards. And then was later turned into a run, which affect like a 31-yard run, right? That's going to really change the way his stats work. But it kind of doesn't matter, right? He had a really high success rate. I think it was like 57% on his runs, especially in the first half. Great. I think that taking a look at some of his runs, I would not argue that a lot of that was a product of outstanding blocking. I think that he was doing a lot of it on his own. He of course does like get an injury later, like into the fourth quarter, and so Jordan Mason has to take over. It sounds like it's not that big a deal, but like also at the same time, like come on, man. And like you can't blame him, but like it is frustrating. But no, he played well. Showed a lot of like, especially out of the plant step, a lot of burst. And kind of figured out how to read what was going to be available to him like very, very quickly. Which is great because it produced a lot of yardage, especially on the outside, but some yardage on the inside too. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, it was absolutely worth mentioning, and I was confused. I didn't understand who JJ McCarthy was handing the ball off to for a moment, because he hasn't necessarily been starting since he's been back. So
when I was writing up, like when I was watching it live and I was writing up my notes for like live reference during the game, I had for like the first two runs just marked it as Jordan Mason, right? I was like, yeah, and then Jordan Mason. Wait, hold on. That's a 3. What's going on?
Nope, that is absolutely Aaron Jones. You go, Aaron Jones. You go, Glenn Coco. So we had that. We had Justin Jefferson scoring a touchdown for the first time since week 1.
Yeah, he seemed pretty jazzed about that. He was like, I don't care how many yards I got. I finally got that touchdown. That was great.
A little less jazzed when the ball sailed 15 yards over his head when he was about 6 feet away.
Yeah, he seemed kind of frustrated about that one. Which, I'm not going to take that from him. That's fair.
But the offensive line, it held together, kind of. But this was not a great game for the offensive line. And you had mentioned earlier, they were giving up pressure fairly quickly.
Yeah. A lot of that, like Brendel talked about him a little bit. A little bit of that, by my estimation, was Donovan Jackson, but not a ton. More of that, Will Fries, which we've talked about throughout the season as being kind of like he's just not playing up to the level that we were expecting coming in, and I wonder if like injury is playing a pretty significant role in that. I know, like I'm looking at these PFF grades now. Yeah, Blake Brendel ended up with a really positive PFF grade, and I can't be there with them on that because I feel like he contributed to some of the pressures that are attributed to Will Fries. And then Brian O'Neill had like a pretty, I'm not going to say awful game, but not a very good game. A lot of that coming from Aiden Hutchinson. But Christian Darrisaw, I thought, played pretty well, which is good because I was actually more concerned about him and not just like whether or not he would play, right? That obviously matters, but also like in addition to that, like how he would play, because in the 9 snaps that he had against the Chargers, he was so poor that probably helped inform the decision to shut him down in that game. So I was wondering if that was going to be kind of a concern here, but luckily it wasn't. So some pretty poor offensive line play, some like famously bad Jordan Mason reps. That was, oh boy. I think it's just 1 sack and 1 hit technically, but like, good Lord, it feels like 2 of the sacks came directly through Jordan Mason, which I maybe the Lions should have blitzed more or something, because like the Vikings were not handling the blitz nearly as well, and Jordan Mason was kind of one reason why. Which, I don't want to like suggest he's had a bad year or anything like that. Jordan Mason's had a really good year, but like that can't happen, and is one reason I think the Vikings are pretty happy to put Aaron Jones out there, because even though Aaron Jones is not as physically as imposing as Jordan Mason is, he is a better pass protector.
Before we get onto the defensive side of the ball, there were some real questionable calls from the referees this particular game, and a number of them went the Vikings' way, but like this was a oddly officiated game.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I didn't really understand the way the refs were calling that. There was like a really bad roughing the passer against the Lions, right? That I was just like, why was that roughing the passer? And a bunch of people were like, body weight roll. And I was like, no, I get like what the rationale would be, but that is like very stupid. Like that's not. He doesn't put his body weight. He's like preventing his body weight from going down onto McCarthy, with his arms, which I hate, by the way. Like because I think that exposes the pass rusher to a higher chance of injury. And like they deserve some protection too. Like it's the quarterback has to take on some of the risk. Um, but like, okay, the body weight rule exists, and he was performing the thing he needed to do. I guess live it didn't look like that, but I wasn't under the impression that it was a violation live. So whatever. Then you have like the Justin Jefferson catch that was taken away, which I don't know. It was not that different from the interception. It was different, right? But not that different. So I hated that. That was pretty frustrating. But yeah, overall, I just thought the reffing in that game was bizarre and not very good, and it hurt both teams and it disrupted the flow of the game in ways that didn't make a ton of sense. And I don't think that's the reason the Lions ended up. I think it's a season high in penalties, like 10 for 76. I don't think that's the reason, but like it certainly doesn't help, right? And the Vikings took on, like, I want to say 7 for 56. I don't know. Yeah, really poorly officiated.
Where do you land on the Aiden Hutchinson kick penalty?
I think that, so one of the things, and I've brought this up a couple of times before, we have to be really careful about slow motion, especially for penalties that kind of require some level of understanding of intent. And here, I think, is one of those penalties where you kind of have to understand intent, because we're not very good at evaluating intent when something occurs in slow motion, even though we are actively telling our brain, right, that this thing is occurring in slow motion. So we're trying to correct for it. And we still, after we're like, now I've accounted for the fact that it's in slow motion, we are just much more likely, and there have been studies on this, much more likely to assign intentionality in slow motion replays. And so I think for any penalty that requires some level of determining intentionality, we probably shouldn't be using slow motion. I really don't think we should. And this is an example of that. I understand why it was called, and I understand that maybe you call some of those even when you're not confident that the intent was to do damage to the quarterback in a way that was illegal, right? But I just think it's not fair. I don't know how else to put it. Like, you know how like you call the penalties that are like unnecessary roughness when the quarterback is sliding and the slide starts after the defender has launched, and then the defender hits the quarterback in the head, even though they cannot change their trajectory once the quarterback has started sliding, which occurred after they made the decision, and you still call that penalty. And it's like one of those where it's like, well, this is tremendously unfair, but you have to call it so that in the future you can prevent people from doing the same thing intentionally, right? And so like you call the unintentional ones because later on down the line, if you don't, people will do it intentionally. And it feels like that's what that was. So I'm not saying it was the wrong penalty to call. I don't like that it was called, but I get why it was called and why you would do it for like precedent setting reasons. But in my like heart of hearts, I don't think that a penalty occurred there, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, let's talk about the other side of the ball. Let's talk about Vikings defense. And I suppose it's kind of hard to talk about the Vikings defense without talking about, well, really all of the injuries that seem to happen to the Lions over the course of the game.
Yeah, so I think the most notable one was probably the Christian Mahogany injury, right? Which occurred like, I want to say halfway through the game, which impacted the Lions' communication, which, Dan Campbell brought up as like kind of one of the more proximate reasons that they had a bad game. Fair enough. And I think that like as the game went on, the Lions' extant injuries and the incurring injuries just kind of disrupted the flow of what the Lions were trying to do. Like, yeah, they still had, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah, they still had Jameson Williams, but Jesus, man. And like, I don't like, the Lions have been generating injuries. I don't know how else to put it. Generating injuries like all season and all off season, but it has impacted, their ability to kind of continue, right? Like Penei Sewell is probably blocking better if he doesn't have like multiple injuries in the game, like the eye injury, the shoulder injury. I think there was a Taylor Decker injury in the game too. Like a lot is going on there. And I don't know that either Sewell or Decker missed meaningful time, if I remember correctly. Um, but well, hold on. Let me find this out. Um, do do do. This should be an area where we like pause and pick back up.
I mean, we could, or I mean, I can also just say that it was amazing to me, quite frankly, because I had to pause the game like at halftime to go run and do something and then come back. So I like had to do that thing in YouTube TV where you like skip ahead 30 seconds to catch up to the play. And eventually I caught up and I was able to like have my phone back up and look in Discord and everything else. But when I was doing that, I was like, oh my God, I finally texted my buddy in Michigan. It's like, is this the 7th or the 8th Lions player that has been injured this half? Because it just felt like they all kept getting injured in the third quarter.
Okay, yeah. So I just looked it up. So Decker did return to the game. Tate Ratledge, the right guard, also returned to the game, but they did leave for moments during the game. So Taylor Decker, Tate Ratledge, Penei Sewell all sustained some kind of injury or aggravated some kind of injury during the game. I don't think Sewell missed a snap. Maybe he did. But that was impactful. He also got poked in the eye. Christian Mahogany misses the game or leaves during the game. So yeah, that impacted the ability for the Lions to continue communication. That impacted their ability to put out kind of the most talented unit that they had. And so their matchups were bad. But yeah, I mean, that's good context, but like the Vikings defense played really, really well. And that was nice to see because it feels like we're kind of waiting for that to happen. We saw a really outstanding defense last year. And while we've seen kind of a lot of glimpses and performances of a good defense, it's never felt as complete as it did in this Lions game, which is kind of funny because like 24 points is not like an outstanding defensive performance, but it felt like a better defensive performance than some games where they allowed like fewer points, right? So, and like more complete, right? Like you had the run defense, you had the pass rush, you had the pass coverage, and like I guess against the Browns, you're a little bit even then the run defense against the Browns is pretty bad, right? So like you allow the Lions to have 24 points. And you still feel better about the defense than like the 17 points that they gave up against the Browns, the 22 points they gave up against the Falcons. It's really only the Bengals game, which doesn't count because holy crap, where you feel better about the defense. So yeah, it was a really complete defensive performance, and I think it has more than just a product of like these lingering concerns for the Lions' offensive line.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the defense. And the defense, in addition to all of that you just said, the defense was just absolutely ridiculous on third down.
Yeah, I think was it 2 for 9 or something like that. It was 29% on third down. That was it. And I would say would have been nice if that had continued in fourth down. I think they were 3 for 3 in giving up fourth down conversions, but because they created so many long third downs that they shut down, there were actually very few relative to the Lions. Fourth down conversion attempts. And so the Vikings did a pretty good job creating third and longs. And after the first drive, we're a bit like, God, that was so frustrating, that first drive. After the first drive, they did a pretty good job of making sure that like the third and longs were like appropriately difficult to actually convert. The Lions had negative 0.04 EPA per play in this game, a 40th percentile performance overall. And I believe not their worst, right? They had like that really bad game against the Packers. They had another bad game, but like third or fourth worst. And it's just like not the team that we saw last year that was like leading the league in points scored or anything like that. Truly outstanding run defense, pretty decently good pass defense. It occurred with a very high blitz rate. PFF has it at 60%. I know that like the Amazon Web Services blitz rate for the Vikings was like really low. Like Tom Brady kept on talking about how like their blitz rate in this game is lower than it typically is. And I was like looking at the live blitz rates from both Next Gen Stats and from PFF, and they were both like they were very different, but they were both like for above average blitz rates for the Vikings this year. So I thought that was like pretty unusual. But yeah, I guess that's just like what happens sometimes. But like a 60% blitz rate according to the PFF, and that was smart. Like so all year, right? We've been seeing Jared Goff, and for the past couple of years, we've been seeing Jared Goff just eviscerate a lot of the Vikings blitzing plans, and we've seen him do better against the blitz when it was the Vikings than against standard dropbacks. And so you kind of always wonder, like, hey, maybe you should dial it down, and they absolutely did not do that. And yeah, when the blitz got home, it was really phenomenal. So the Vikings had, according to next gen stats, 11 pressures from off-ball linebackers, the most any team has been able to produce since the 2021 Dallas Cowboys, when Micah Parsons was listed as an off-ball linebacker and primarily played that role. So like a good company to kind of be in, right? Yeah, I think that you saw a really good performance from Blake Cashman. You saw a really good performance from Eric Wilson as pass rushers. We'll talk about them as linebackers too. Jonathan Grenard, like you have to, like every week, it's like, well, he got pressure. That's 3/4 of the battle. That's great. And then, but like he's not doing anything with it, and that's very frustrating. Like please, when you get to the quarterback, like take him down. Like that, we would very much appreciate if you did that. And he's not doing that. But in this game, it didn't matter that much, right? Because Javon Hargrave got 2 sacks. Jalen Redmond, I believe, got a sack. Or Levi Drake Rodriguez got us. Like you had people like cleaning up and getting sacks. Andrew Van Ginkel was back. He produced pressure on, I think it was like 15 pass rushing snaps, 12 coverage snaps, just playing his like crazy do anything role that he plays. Really great performances from them. I guess from a pass rush perspective, the only guy that kind of failed to impress was Jonathan Allen. I guess Dallas Turner also didn't. But like holistically, from a pass rush perspective, really outstanding performances and really good blitz design. The crossdog stuff that the broadcast highlighted, it was really good. So like that's when you have the 2 players in the A gap again. So that's either side of the center. And in this case, it was linebackers. So very like a throwback to what Zimmer was doing. And then sometimes what you do is both linebackers take a step forward, and then which way the center turns, the other linebacker is the one who rushes. That's what Zimmer loved to do. But here, what they would do is the linebackers would cross paths a lot. Not every play, but cross paths a lot. And that would make blocking angles extremely difficult for the center and for the running back assigned to protect them, which after the game, or I guess the next day, Dan Campbell was asked about like Jahmyr Gibbs giving up so many pressures in pass protection. And, he gave like a lot of reasons. One of them, like, Gibbs just wasn't having that good of a day. We know he's good. But also like, he was like credited to the Vikings for like forcing him to continue staying in there because like, sometimes it's like a check release. And if they're not immediately blitzing, you release. And a lot of times, especially when you've got man coverage, a linebacker will determine whether or not they blitz based off of whether or not the running back is releasing into the flat or releasing into a pass coverage or staying into pass protect. If they're staying in, you blitz, right? And it wasn't that. The Vikings were forcing Jahmyr Gibbs into pass protection, which is the thing he is the least good at, right? So that was a good spot to be in. So good design from a pass rush perspective, good individual performances from a pass rush perspective. A lot of it was built kind of off of what those linebackers could do in the blitz, which is pretty great. But yeah, there's a ton of pressure on Goff, like over 40%, like a 42, 45%, depends on kind of whether or not you're using PFF or next gen. But he had a significantly above average pressure rate, like a disrupted pocket there. And he can't move. He can't get out of it and create like yards when scrambling. And so he was pretty well contained, unlike Herbert and Hurts. And that led to a lot of sacks. That was really nice to see.
It was really nice to see. I was thoroughly enjoying the fact that we kept seeing the Detroit Lions punter, who hasn't been seen a lot this year.
Yeah. Jack Fox has not had a ton of play. I think a lot of that obviously has to do with the third and long stuff that we talked about, but also like shutting down the running game, right, was huge, right? So that's where Blake Cashman comes into play. I thought he did a lot on the back end that that allowed other players to kind of freelance a little bit and do what they needed to do to kind of get the tackles. Eric Wilson, outstanding run defense performance. Um, a really good combination of kind of determining whether or not he should shoot the gap and kind of try to get the tackle for loss, and whether or not it'd be better to kind of maintain discipline. Again, one or two mistakes here or there. He was missing tackles, but they just didn't bother me because when you miss tackles in the offensive backfield, it usually results in a tackle for loss anyway, and you're slowing down the guy to allow other people to kind of make the play. So really great performance from the two of them. Javon Hargrave was a really good run defender. Instead of having to take on an anchor against double teams, he was splitting them. Again, not a great game from Theo Jackson. It's sounding like the Vikings maybe miscalculated with him there. Pretty decent game from Harrison Smith from a run defense perspective. And then on those third and longs, the ones that actually forced the punter onto the field, really great, I thought, from most of the secondary. Like you had Isaiah Rodgers kind of doing his up and down thing, which is kind of annoying. I don't know. He's kind of like, I don't know if I said it on this podcast or another one, but he's like rookie Trayvon Diggs, where it's like, well, when the good stuff happens, it's like really outstandingly good. When it's bad, it's pretty bad. And upon review, it wasn't nearly as bad as that, but it was still kind of annoying, right? Like the Jameson Williams touchdown, which was also an offensive pass interference that was uncalled. I still think Isaiah Rodgers could have done a little bit more there. But like you have to acknowledge that play shouldn't have happened. But that's just what a DB's life is like, and so it maybe should have played better there. Not too many mistakes from the secondary in that regard. Really annoying that Sam Laporta just kept on carving up like Josh Metellus on the first drive, but that got resolved too. So yeah, great run defense, great coverage. Would have liked it if the special teams return unit was better, but other than that, the punt return was fine. The kicking was fine, I guess. The punting was okay. It was really the kick return that was really Jesus.
Yeah, before we move on to the mailbag, I guess I had one other thing I wanted to mention, and it has more to do with coaching and play calling than anything else. It seemed like the Vikings had every opportunity to milk a bunch of time off the clock and chose not to during like their final drive. Do you agree with how they ended up handling that, or would you have gone for it a little harder and try to knock off an extra minute and a half a clock?
Yeah, I think like I understand like the desire to kind of throw the ball because you think you're better at it, and the touchdown is more important to you than the clock. But I don't think the touchdown is more important to you than the clock, and I think that draining a minute off the clock is going to do a lot more for you than scoring a quick touchdown, which both of them will end the game in your favor probably. But like also they're not like mutually exclusive, right? Like you can drain the clock and then also get a touchdown. That is the ideal scenario. But yeah, the throw that was an incompletion that stopped the clock, and then after that the sack that was going out of bounds, right? And that stopped the clock. First of all, JJ, come on, man. Like if you're going to take the sack, just go down and that'll drain it's not different. Like you're taking a sack, you're going out of bounds. It's not different if you just go down. And so you could just drain the clock there. That gives you 30 seconds of time to work with. That's not meaningfully different. Maybe a yard behind, who cares? That was annoying, but like the play calling was 2 pass plays, right? And like, again, I understand it if you think the pass plays are substantially, or at least I understand the reasoning, I should say. If the pass plays are much more likely to get you the result that you want, right? But no, that's not. The running game was outstanding. Like, yeah, Aaron Jones isn't out there anymore. It's Jordan Mason. But you like Jordan Mason. I know you like Jordan Mason. Do it. What are you doing? Do the thing. Run the ball. Drain the clock. If you don't get any yards, that's not different than what happened, right? First of all. Second, The clock is so important. So you could have drained maybe a minute, maybe a minute and a half. I know that that's what Brady was saying. Would have been nice, I think. I don't think there's any way around it. Like that's, yeah, I think that was really poor play calling at the end, which is unusual because Kevin O'Connell, yeah, I know a lot of people have been complaining about him this year, and I understand why. I mean, they're losing games. It's very easy to complain when that's happening. But he typically is quite good at end of game situations. So I don't really know why that happened.
Well, let's get to the mailbag. And there's a very important question to start, and I have an announcement as a result of this. Will Melvin asks, will there be a rule change next season in the Hell Leagues wherein if the kicker breaks the NFL record, you automatically win that week?
Yeah, it's a good question for you.
Next year, actually, not even next year. Moving forward, including this year.
Yeah, because you could just change rules whenever.
Yeah, the Hell League is just like this. If your kicker breaks the NFL record, you get 150 points.
There you go. You still have to like, finish out the rest of the game. You still have to make sure you roster a full set of players. You got to make sure your other kicker isn't subtracting 100 points from you. But yeah, no, you're probably going to win. Yeah, I'm not going to. Okay. Just like when you catch the golden snitch, you got to have enough points that's going to help you, right? Obligatory J.K. Rowling is
no, we're not. No, you have been a long supporter of J.K. Rowling. You're going to move on to the next question.
I'm just using a cultural reference that people understand. That's all I'm doing, Dixon, and then I'm giving context to the cultural reference.
Great. Zach Dixon asks an important question, and we haven't broken this out this year. So I want to, for the uninitiated, it is time for Arif to debate the only person who is on his level. I would like to introduce you once again to Arif Debates Arif for a very important question from Zach Dixon. Are K-balls good for the game?
Okay. How do I start this? With a yes? With a no. I'll start with a no. No, K-balls aren't good for the game. I mean, I feel like we're babying these kickers too much. We already know that kickers aren't real football players. We just kind of deal with them because of the way the rules have evolved over the past however many years. But people don't watch the game to see what kickers are going to do. They watch the game to see how football is going to play out. And these 60-plus yard field goals are not just giving kickers a little bit more comfort about their ability to kind of hit kicks. We're also reducing the amount of variability in games, right? We want to see exciting games where we've got a little bit more variability, and now they're hitting extra points at a higher rate than we're used to seeing. Now we're seeing kind of kickers have the ability to not just hit those extra points, but hit the 60 yarders, right? Almost 70 yarders. We saw that Brendan Aubrey had the distance for the 68 yarder. The thing is, records used to be nice because they were rare, and now we're getting records all the time, enough to the point where we are thinking of changing a rule in the Hell League for it. And the problem here is that we're actually reducing the likelihood that coaches want to be aggressive because you've got 4th and 5 from the 40-yard line, and you should go for that. It'll be fun to have a football play where you've got a tackle that is tackle eligible that you think is going to kind of be an extra blocker while you run a play action so you can get the requisite yardage, but instead now he's leaking out. Now you got a 5-yard play on 4th and 5. Fantastic work. That's awesome. We're getting good football because the coaches who are more aggressive are being rewarded for it. And now coaches aren't being rewarded for being more aggressive. And now you've got Troy Aikman now back on his shtick about how maybe you should have kicked the field goal there because field goals are automatic now. I hate that. I hate that you always get 3 points as soon as you cross the 50-yard line. There is no tension anymore. And these close games are way too close. We've already seen the number of games that nearly tie go up. And I think part of that is because as soon as you cross the 50-yard line, you're in field goal range, especially for these crappy kickers. I think one of the other things that we really like about the league is if you screw up at kicker, you're boned. And now it's really hard to screw up at kicker because the K-balls have made it a lot easier for kickers to make their kicks. So you have less variability in the way that like extra points and field goals play out. You've got less aggression going on. You're babying a position group that we don't even consider to be football players. And you're making it so that there's less tension in these games so that anytime you cross the 50-yard, like you don't have to work for points anymore. anymore. Like the league has gotten way too soft in terms of getting us offensive points, as if more points is always going to lead to, more viewership. I mean, if that was the case, why not just assign a point every time you have a minute of possession? That's meaningless, right? The points have to come from somewhere to be exciting. And now we've got this offensive league where you've got these K-balls that are making it so that every time a kicker misses a kick, we're asking, well, hey, hold on. Did he get the special K ball or did he get the normal crappy ball? Who cares, man? Make him kick. This is crazy.
All right, so let's hear the pro version of K-balls being good for the NFL.
All right, so I think that if you think that this reduces aggression, you're not thinking in 3 dimensions, maybe not even 2 dimensions. Idiotic thought process that only takes a look at these 60-plus yard kicks. But Greg Olsen outlined it pretty well just 2 weeks ago. If you have the ability to go for it on 4th down in a goal-to-go situation, right? It's 1st and 10 from the 10-yard line, right? Or it's 4th and 3 from the 3-yard line. You're much more likely to go for it because you know that the opponent with a good return now has to only cross the 50-yard line in order to get 3 points. And so you can't just get 3 points because now you're giving them the ball back to get 3 points. And so you have to be more aggressive and get that touchdown. And that happens way more often as an actual consideration that people have to make closer to we get to the goal line. Like that's why you have the Cowboys trying to go for it on 4th down in this game against the Cardinals, which is a way more exciting way for that game to play out. But instead, because you've got all of these kickers that have the ability to hit from 60 yards out, you have to consider the fact that the opposing possession is going to create more points. And yeah, it's still football. Obviously, if kickers weren't football players, we just wouldn't roster them. But we pay attention to kicker battles just as much as we pay attention to the left guard battle or to the wide receiver battle. Having more battles to pay attention to, having more technique to pay attention to, having more of an understanding of what kind of goes into the game of football, and having a football game that is as diverse in terms of the skills that you can have is what makes football more exciting than baseball. It makes it more exciting than basketball, where this positionless basketball has made it so that you've got all of these overlapping skill sets and you don't really have, a 5'10", 165-pound receiver that is just as valuable as a 6'5", 275-pound edge rusher. Like that is a crazy situation that just doesn't happen in other sports, and kickers add to that variability. And this idea that somehow this flattens out the skill group of kickers is nuts to me. The K-ball doesn't make you necessarily that much more accurate. It gives you a little bit more range, but the kickers have to manage all of this a lot better in order to kind of differentiate themselves. So yeah, we got a couple more records, which are fun, by the way. We didn't have a field goal record for Matt Prater a bunch of years, and then Justin Tucker tried, right? And you had a field goal record stand for 5 years. It is annoying to have a record that was set by a guy who is missing half a foot be the record for 30 years. That's crazy. We want to see progression in every element of the sport that includes kicking, and having K-balls allows kickers to be more skill expressive. It means that there's less variability introduced by the equipment that we have. That's nuts. Can you imagine if touchdowns were decided by how slippery the ball was because the receiver couldn't hold on to it? Is just whatever it is that day. That's so annoying. That sucks. Now you can treat kickers as having an actual control over the outcomes. We're going to reduce the variability. We're going to increase the number of positions that matter. That increases the strategic complexity of the game, and it allows more people to pay attention to a sport that a lot of people maybe have been kind of checking out of because they felt like they couldn't participate. But now more people can participate because they can be kickers. And I think it adds a lot more personality to the league because as you add, kickers and punters and stuff like that, you got more people who are like Chris Kluwe, right? Who are like Marquette King, who have the ability to express themselves in locker rooms and I think liven up an atmosphere, right? So I think that not only do you get actually more aggression, you get more variability in the game, you get more variance in the styles that matter, you get more understanding of the kinds of things that affect games. And with this new dynamic kickoff, you even get kickers that are different, that are good at different elements of the dynamic kickoff. Now that they have more control over the ball, they've got the ability to do a knuckleball or land it in the landing zone or kick it out the back of the end zone. Whatever works for that particular team, you have more variance and strategy in that element. And it is a little bit higher scoring, and it's not meaningless scoring. You still have to arrange your way into position, and you still have to have a good kicker. It's not meaningless scoring any more than an extra point is meaningless scoring. It creates a lot more opportunities for teams to kind of put their mark on the league in a unique way in a famously homogenous league. Terrible idea that K-balls are bad. This is one of the better innovations that we've seen in the NFL recently.
One day, I'm going to say something along the lines of, all right, let's hear the positive version of this. And you're just going to go, nope, next question. Like you're just too caught up in it. You're just, nope, next question. We're done. I'm not even going to entertain it. And then, and then moving on. Let's go to Raul. By the way, do you see stars by the end of it when you're doing that? Like, do you like to catch your breath or?
This one, not as much, but I think there was like 2-3 Arif debates Arif ago that I was like,
we can say,
yeah, love the sentences that this produces. That I was like, oh man, I should tell James I need to take a break. But then I was like, no, that's coward stuff. I can't let
the Andrew Tate video I watched earlier says I must power through.
Yeah, right, yeah. I can't let him know. That's a sign of weakness, and that's what he bounces.
Yep. You don't tap your credit card, you insert the credit card. That's what a man does. It was one of the more ridiculous things I've ever seen the other today. All right, we're gonna go to Raul, who asks, now that we're clearly buying at the trade deadline, can we have Mekhi Blackmon back?
Boy, would that? I mean, I'm not saying that he's like good, but it would be nice to have him if you're like, hey man, I don't know that Dwight McGlothern has it. Time for Fabian Moreau to come out. Which, in his defense, 1 target, 0 receptions, 0 yards. Great. But he played like 30 odd snaps. And if it wasn't for the fact that the Vikings were getting pressure within like 2.2 seconds, I think that would have been a huge problem. And I would rather have Blackmon than Fabian Moreau out there. And I guess Dwight McGlothern. So that'd be nice. But I don't know that that's in the offing. I'm sorry.
No, probably not. Sam Silver asks, in his post-game press conference, Dan Campbell said many of the pressures allowed were self-induced and that the team wasn't on the same page. Is this an indicator that the Lions beat themselves more than the Vikings won? How do we as thoughtful fans differentiate good defensive play from bad offensive play in this situation?
When it comes to like pressure production, that is actually pretty difficult to do. I would recommend reading Brandon Thorne's Substack, the Trench Warfare Substack, which breaks down offensive line and defensive line play, so you can kind of get an understanding of what is a demonstration of good technique and what is like a demonstration of like this guy kind of got one for free. I would say that the increased miscommunication on that Detroit Lions defensive line or offensive line did play a somewhat significant role in the Vikings getting pressure really quickly very often. But I do think the Vikings defensive line played really well. And the way I can kind of assert that is like when you have like these one-on-one blocks, right? Where it's not about trickery, it's not about communication. The Vikings were still doing very well. They were getting underneath the Lions offensive linemen's pads. They were executing swim moves appropriately. They were splitting these double teams. When you take a look at technique, you want to take a look at And this is more an experience thing than it is something that, someone can tell you and you can instantly see it. But you want to take a look at kind of the difficulty of what they're trying to do and what that means, right? The easy version of this is taking a look at DJ Wanham Sacks, his final year as a Viking, and saying, oh my God, they're all unblocked, right? That's the easy version of that. And then over time, you kind of understand like, oh, here he was kind of the looper on a defensive line stunt. And the penetrator, the guy who is not getting pressure, actually did a lot more here because he's pinning 2 offensive linemen, and that makes the looper's job easier. But at the same time, the looper still has to have a lot of athleticism in order for this pressure to be meaningful. And so you can kind of recognize that sack was created by, in this case, like a Jalen Redmond pinning the tackle and the guard, and Javon Hargrave getting around him, right? And Hargrave, great work, good athleticism, all that. But like the greater task here was Jalen Redmond or something like that, right? Like over time, you kind of understand like the assignment here is more difficult, and the blocking angle makes it difficult. The angle at which you're bending around the corner is a rare one to hit here. So a lot of it is just like over time, you kind of get an understanding of like, hey, this offensive lineman is doing a really poor job. He's tripping over himself. That's an easy sack for the defensive lineman. So we know that the defensive line did not do something here to induce the win. It was kind of not, fate that the guy was going to win, but like pretty natural that it was going to happen. So kind of tough to do, kind of difficult for someone to just tell you how to do it. But I would say that the Vikings played very well and that the Lions also made a lot of mistakes on the offensive line that helped enable the Vikings to play well.
Andy asks, it felt like JJ had a better game than what was reflective from the production stats. I believe it's because he had a great first quarter and a few clutch plays to help him win the game. However, his production was still poor, around negative 0.1 EPA TV. How should we assess his performance? And I'm just going to include the question from DT as well. Mm-hmm. It seems like JJ McCarthy's biggest issues are throwing on the run and getting too hyped up after being hit a few times. How much of this is fixable this season and how much long term? And are there any examples of quarterbacks who got better at it?
As for examples of quarterbacks who got better throwing on the run, I think the easiest example to point to is someone like a Kirk Cousins. I would say Teddy Bridgewater got a little bit better at it too, and those are obviously like kind of local to Minnesota. Ryan Tannehill is a really good example. One thing that he did well in Tennessee is he got better at throwing on the run than he was in Miami. But yeah, and it's easier to look at like West Coast play action heavy Shanahan offenses to find those quarterbacks because you see them throwing on the run a lot more often. And like to some extent, I guess like Alex Smith, you want to go like way back. Those are examples of quarterbacks who got better at throwing on the run. Quarterbacks that got maybe better at getting too jazzed up after getting hit a couple of times. First of all, I think that is a really difficult thing to identify. I guess maybe Matthew Stafford is a good example of somebody who did that. But I would say that overall, that first thing, getting hit and then kind of getting a little bit too electrified by that experience and playing a little bit too urgently. I think that's something that over time just kind of, it doesn't always settle down, but it is something that most quarterbacks, I think, kind of ease into if that's what's happening here with McCarthy. Maybe a good example of that, aside from Matthew Stafford, or maybe someone who didn't ever do that, would be like, well, I guess Sam Darnold eventually did. But for a while, it felt like Sam Darnold never did. But yeah, Blake Bortles, would do that. Blaine Gabbert, so both of those Jacksonville quarterbacks. But yeah, I think that the issues are fixable. I don't know the likelihood of that throwing on the run being fixable. I just know that it has been fixed by other quarterbacks. And I don't think that that's something you're going to get necessarily this season. I will say that like Wentz is much worse at throwing on the run. Like when we talked about, the things Wentz is worse at and the things that he's better at, they had a very similar weakness profile. Like a lot of the weaknesses are the same on paper, and Wentz's weaknesses were less significant than McCarthy's. But the throwing on the run thing is much worse for Wentz. That is true. And I would say the way to assess his performance in light of these traits-based issues is to understand that like what he did well hasn't cemented itself into the way that he plays. He hasn't built up muscle memory yet for the things that are helping enable him, but it is very clear that he knows what he needs to do. And that is not nothing. Like a lot of quarterbacks can learn in practice or in the film room the things they need to do, and then it just like never materializes on the field. Like Christian Ponder, like he just never showed up on the field the things that he knew he needed to get better at, right? And McCarthy is doing that at least. Is that enough? No. At some point, the adoption of these skills needs to kind of cement itself in a more permanent way. But yeah, like right now, I don't think McCarthy is reliably somebody that we can call a good quarterback. But okay, we're not there yet anyway. I don't think that was at this point the expectation.
Let's go to Ben, who asks, some of the Vikings' most successful run plays came when they ran directly at Aiden Hutchinson. It looked like he struggled to seal the edge. Do you think it was more calling the right play against the Lions' defensive call, just good blocking, or poor decisions by Hutchinson?
Well, so in this question, there are also like some examples that Ben provided to take a look at. And I looking at those examples, I don't think that this is the case, right? So he referred to Aaron Jones's 11-yard run on the first play, his 14-yard run on the second drive, Jordan Mason's 13-yard run in the late fourth quarter, and then the touchdown that J.J. McCarthy ran. So I looked at those specifically, but that was not the impression I got looking at the film. I should say the broadcast. I didn't look at the film. The broadcast footage coming out of the game. And I think the thing that's happening here is that Hutchinson, in most of these examples, is moving pre-snap, right? So you see where he lines up. Then before the snap happens, he moves to another gap. And I think that might be why it seems like he might be more focused on, as the question expanded, on trying to get the sack at the expense of proper containment or something like that. That's not what that is. These are either decisions that he's making, sure, or decisions the defensive coordinators are making to attack a particular gap. But it is understood that the rest of the defense either knows that based off of the assignment, and he's just lining up in the wrong gap intentionally at the beginning of the play clock in order to line up at the right gap later on to make play calling more difficult or offensive line adjustments more difficult. Or he is making a decision based off of what he's seeing, and then the linebackers have to adjust the way that they play all of these shifting gaps anyway. So I don't think Hutchinson was a problem on any of these. So that first play, the 11-yard run, Hutchinson is playing his gap. He's got decent leverage, actually. He was not supposed to play outside the tight end. So he didn't make a choice that was poor. The play design made it difficult for him to have an impact on the play. And then as you watch this play string out, Alex Anzalone, the Lions linebacker, fills the next gap. And then Terrion Arnold is supposed to have the next gap after that, the one that Jones eventually runs through, and just Terrion Arnold played poorly. On the second play, Hutchinson is like doubled, or I guess Hutchinson actually played well on this play. It's a run to the outside to Hutchinson's side that he gets 14 yards. And you're like, well, how could he play well in this play? So it seems to be kind of like a combination of what you see on a split flow on a zone run where the tight end is coming across the formation. In this case, the tight end motions in and then back out. So it's not really a split flow, but he's moving in the same direction as the play. And then you've got a pulling guard, Donovan Jackson. Now, Jackson gets caught up on Hutchinson, which means that Aiden Hutchinson is occupying two blockers on this play. I think Jackson actually played that poorly, but credit to Hutchinson for requiring two blockers on him. That is an example of a good play, right? But there was still a 14-yard run. And I think it's because Anzalone screwed up the run fit on that one. He goes to the same gap that Brian Branch is going in through. So, and this is a complicated one. There's multiple moving gaps because of the pulling guard, because of the moving tight end. And so like somebody like Anzalone has got like a lot of decisions to make very quickly. The third play, the 13-yard run, that's another play that's strung out to the outside. Again, Hutchinson plays well. Arnold misses his tackle, Terrion Arnold. And on the fourth play, the J.J. McCarthy touchdown, Hutchinson does not lose contain at all. That is an assigned twist where he is meant by assignment to loop into the gap between the guard and the center, to loop into that A gap. And so he has to abandon his gap by the play design, by assignment, to loop around the defensive tackle who clears room for him so that he can get the pressure. And then one risk of running an end tackle twist, this is often what it's called, ET twist, which way back when the 49ers had with the two Smiths, it was like Justin Smith and then it was the outside linebacker that kept on getting in trouble, but had like an outstanding rookie season. I'll figure that out. But the consequence of having that kind of decision is that you lose contain. Like that's just what happens. So hold on. War number Alden Smith, that was it. Alden Smith and Justin Smith would do this all the time, where Alden Smith would take advantage of Justin Smith occupying two blockers. So I don't think any of these are an example of Aiden Hutchinson playing poor contain or struggling to seal the edge. I think this was a combination of the right play calling at some points. J.J. McCarthy scrambling wasn't even a play call, but just kind of the right decision there. And sometimes just, he can play well on his block, but other players are not playing well on their blocks. And so that's how those plays kind of, become huge.
Andy Deutsch asks, why did the Aaron Jones screen not count as a completion and add to McCarthy's stats?
Yeah, it was because of backwards throw. So initially you take a look at it, I think from the broadcast angle, it just looks like a throw. But McCarthy is, I think, ahead of one of those 5-yard markers, like the lines that run all the way across the field, right? And he throws to that line marker where Aaron Jones is. Very, very slightly a backwards throw, which then becomes a run for 31 yards. So that's the technical answer. The real answer is, of course, that the NFL has it out for J.J. McCarthy and are trying to make him look bad.
Yeah, we all knew that.
Yeah, of course.
Ben asks, has there been any mention of Ryan Kelly rejoining the lineup? And is the intermediate middle area regularly open on defense due to all the shifting around of the DBs?
So to answer that first thing, not as far as I know. I haven't seen any reports indicating that he's ready to come off of IR and start practicing again, or following that, subsequently joining the lineup. So no news as far as I can tell. As for the intermediate middle area of the field, no. A lot of times linebackers will kind of hunt that zone. Sometimes your free safety will drop, or strong safety will drop down into that area. No, it's not any more open. I mean, like, while I think that the reason somebody like Russell Wilson never throws to the middle of the field is because of, play design and trying to get big plays and deep shots, I would say for the most part, no, you don't get like a ton of open shots. Okay. So Kevin Seifert tweeted out that Ryan Kelly is working out on a side field this week. According to Kevin O'Connell, but that doesn't mean that he has been activated into his 21-day window to practice. There has to be an official transaction for him to be moved off of IR, and he hasn't gotten there yet. So we're still potentially a long way away, which, by the way, if he gets activated, that doesn't mean like it will be 21 days until he plays. That just means that once you're activated, that is kind of the limit, right? Where you can only practice for 21 days before you have to officially be on the roster. So it sets a time limit. It doesn't set an expectation. So he could officially practice for 2 days and then be put back on the team. But it sounds like he hasn't been taken off of IR yet. He's just doing some stuff on a sideline.
Well, Draw Play Dave put another anime Arif in the Discord.
Okay.
I'll let you have fun with that. I guess speaking of which, Antitech asks, for Reef's eternal punishment corner, what circle of hell should Tavier Thomas be damned to for committing back-to-back special teams penalties, one of which nullified Miles Price's return touchdown?
Okay, in fairness, the penalty that nullified the touchdown was also the penalty that created the touchdown. I don't think that Miles Price would have gotten that touchdown if there wasn't a hold on that play. So like that is important. My understanding of the circles of hell, like classically, are that like the first couple of circles of hell are like for like your classic sins. So like limbo is like the first circle, so that's like purgatory, and then you got lust, gluttony, greed, and wrath. And then there's some other stuff that happens, and then there's a heresy circle. And then there's a circle that's reserved for like just violence. And then there's like sub circles, like violence against others, violence against yourself. And then like there's like fraud, which I guess is worse than violence. I don't know. Far be it from me to like penetrate the deeper thoughts of like a 14th century Italian man. I'm sure. Yeah. But then there's treachery is at the bottom there. And I would say probably fraud, which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the 8th circle. So it's not as bad as sowers of discord, liars, and falsifiers, or treachery, right? But it is like it's not good. It's like sorcery. That's pretty bad.
Especially not it's not the kind that you would get off of like Etsy or something
right,
like
yeah,
that.
Of course.
Michael asks, I hate to be negative after a win, but when do we start to get concerned about the development of Turner? This was supposed to be his breakout year, and he's once again taking a back seat to Gink, who, in fairness, is fantastic.
Yeah. So if you take a look at second year performances from defenders, so this year it'd be like Jared Verse and Laiatu Latu. Last year it would be like Will Anderson, Will McDonald, Nolan Smith. There's actually a lot. Byron Young is a good example. Nick Herbig, Yaya Diaby, Keon White, who it turns out is not good, I guess. Isaiah McGuire, the Cleveland guy that almost caused a lot of problems for the Vikings in that game. Lucas Van Ness, Tui Tuipulotu. And then like the year before would include, of course, Aiden Hutchinson, but beyond him, Boy Mafe, Jermaine Johnson, Sam Williams from the Cowboys, Arnold Ebiketie from the Falcons, Nick Benito from the Broncos, who is playing as like a top 5 guy this year, but wasn't, his second year back in 2023. In 2023. You take a look at those guys, and I would say he's well behind those guys, right? I would say that over the past 3 years of kind of like second year or sophomore player, whatever you want to call it, he's well behind the pass rushers that ended up making an impact on the league, or you would think have made an impact on the league. And so it is fair to be concerned about his development, but I would say at the same time, he's not playing as poorly as I think the top level numbers would suggest, right? So he's got a really low pressure rate. I think it's like one in 7 is his pressure rate or something like that. Obviously that's not good. His win rate is 8.6%, which is abysmal. But I don't think that is the whole story when it comes to the way that he's playing, because of kind of the things that he's sometimes being asked to do in terms of like setting the edge and stuff like that. But he's not playing like Jonah Ellis is for the Broncos. He's not playing like Latu is for the Colts. He's obviously not playing like the way Verse is for the Rams. So yeah, I think it's fair to kind of be concerned about it. Is he better than Chop Robinson? Yes. Is he better than Marshawn Nealand? Yes. Is he behind the development curve you would expect for a first round pass rusher? Absolutely yes. So he's a valuable player to have on a team. He is not currently on a trajectory that to me would suggest he was worth that pick. And that pick was also a product of a trade up where the Vikings lost value. The context there, of course, is that it seemed like the Vikings initially made that trade up in order to better position themselves to trade up for a quarterback. They didn't do it, so they just ended up with Dallas Turner. But still, like all of the elements of the price for Turner don't line up to what the Vikings are getting here.
Let's go to Malcolm Wiggles, who asks, for the football fashionism corner, what strategic benefits does wearing Daisy Dukes provide kickers, and why should they be banned / not banned?
Okay, Kirk Herbstreit got like way into his bag about how much he hates it. I don't know why. The there's a rule book discussion about that, but I don't think Kirk Herbstreit was actually cared about that.
No, he's not a stickler for the rules. He's a stickler for tough quarterbacks, but he's not a stickler for the rules necessarily.
Yeah. So yeah. I don't know. At this point, whatever he thinks people should do, it sounds like the opposite, right? Like we should not give him that much credence, right? No. Also, I don't know, man. Boys can't wear shorts anymore. He's having fun with it. Who cares?
So the Oklahoma University kicker, instead of wearing long pants and knee pads and the long like ankle protection, whatever, just went out there displaying his legs.
Yeah, it's just short. Like when you see kind of shorter football pants, they extend to like 1 or 2 inches above the knees, right? Like very like high school dress code, kind of like that's the limit. That's where the pants often go. So you can have your thigh pads underneath them. And his are a little bit higher than that. They are tastefully showing some thigh.
Tasteful. There's a tasteful amount of thigh showing.
Yeah, yeah.
In what we'll post in the show notes.
Right. And That's fun. Just have a little fun. It feels good. It looks fine. Let them live. I think the point where you kind of draw a line is if you at some point have to explain a thing to a child, um, or B, it disrupts like uniformity of the uniform, right? Like it no longer looks like it's part of like the Oklahoma Sooners or whatever it is. And at that point, it's like, well, hold on, man. We can barely see the stripe that runs down the side. Maybe just a little bit more, just for like uniformity's sake. But this is fine.
Our next question is going to be from the Logic Dump, who asks, for the cushioned corner, who should Kevin O'Connell soft bench next time?
Dallas Turner? No.
There's a number of offensive linemen that could probably use it.
Yeah, but the problem is like Carson Wentz playing is bad, but like your fourth backup lineman playing is probably worse. I don't want to say Tavierre Thomas because that would suggest to me that you're not cutting him, right? Like that, like, oh, you're soft benching him, so he's going to be back. That's not great. But he's obviously a candidate. But let's go. Let's be. I guess we are kind of soft benching Ivan Pace, but let's go. Let's be fun with it. Let's say Dallas Turner.
Perfect. Yakid asks, for Arif's trade deadline corner, with Cam Akers already on the Vikings roster, what is the best way for the Vikings to trade for Cam Akers?
Let him hit waivers, just like Kobe King hit waivers and then suddenly ended up on another team. You got to let him hit waivers. The problem is you're asking this question Monday night. The trade deadline is like the next day as we're recording. So that sounds pretty difficult, right? I don't know that you can do that mid-season. So you have to keep him all the way through the playoffs and then trade for him next season is the only way you can do it. Otherwise, I suppose maybe he doesn't hit waivers. Maybe you just cut him now. He signs with the team in the middle of the night. We can just skip the part where he flies over to the team. Save ourselves the hassle. Yeah, because I think he's not eligible to be waived anymore, right? So yeah, you cut him now. Signs with the team in 2 hours, and then 2 hours later, no, you have to wait until the transaction processes, and that's the exact same time the trade deadline is. This should have been done on Friday, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, mistakes were made. This is clearly Kwesi's fault.
Yeah.
Bethany asks, for the AI takeover corner, I'd love a discussion on the below game summary that was on Twitter halfway through the second quarter.
Halfway through the second?
Yep. I remember this being sent to me at the time, and I was laughing. So the summary reads: McCarthy returns from injury, but Vikings lose 31-9 to Lions.
31-9.
JJ McCarthy returned to the Minnesota Vikings lineup after missing 5 games due to a high ankle sprain, facing the Detroit Lions at Ford Field in his first NFL game in Michigan since his college championship. The 22-year-old quarterback, there's a lot of fluff. The 22-year-old quarterback, why is that important? Completed 18 of 35 passes for 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, but the Vikings fell 31-9.
Wow. So he passed for 2 touchdowns and they only scored 9 points?
That's dropping to 3-5 with their third straight loss. Detroit's Jared Goff threw for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns, while the Lions' defense sacked McCarthy multiple times in a dominant performance. So
not only is it like factually wrong, it's like internally inconsistent.
Yeah, Jared Goff threw for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that's 21 points, potentially with extra points, and then you've got another 10 to make up. So one of those has got to be a pick 6.
Well, I mean, it could presumably be a rush, right? It could be Jahmyr Gibbs rushing.
I suppose.
Which way is it? This appears partway through the second quarter, right? So the information that and so this is Grok, right? So there's a bunch of different AIs out there. This is the LLM that is attached to Twitter, but it is not officially a part of Twitter. I think for legal reasons, it's part of XAI, which is a separate company that contracts with Twitter. Everything is, of course, above board because, I mean, these are merely businesses owned by the same guy doing business with each other. Don't worry about it. It theoretically has access to as much real-time information as possible, more so than most of the LLMs, which have some kind of cutoff date, right? Um, so this one should know in general what the score is based off of all of the tweets that are coming in. But on top of that, also should definitely know because the NFL has struck a deal with Twitter, I mean X, to constantly provide a live stream of data and information into the app. And so when you go into the explore page, which used to be the search page, during like on Sunday or during an NFL game, it'll give you the score, right? It's right there. There's a feed, the NFL data feed that informs NFL GSIS, which is what media uses. The thing that gives you the Yahoo points, the thing that gives you your live feeds on ESPN.com, CBS, all that. That is the feed being pumped into Twitter. And because technically Grok is its own thing, right? But it can read all of that. And halfway through the second quarter, not only thinks that the game is done, but that the Vikings, who at that point had already scored 14 points, were about to score 17, had only scored 9 points. And in those 9 points, J.J. McCarthy had thrown for 2 touchdowns. God, the future rules, dude.
Is that the word? Is that what we're calling it? We're saying that it rules?
Sure. The good news is for everybody who like sucks at relationships, I promised my therapist I would be kinder to people who have like AI relationships, but it's so tough.
No. These people do not deserve your respect. They deserve your ridicule.
The reason is because the people in these situations are clearly like alone in like a deep sense, right? And are not getting the connection that they desire, in part because society is so fragmented. And this is literally the loneliest time in human history, despite being as connected as we can be. And we don't get time with people in like physical space, right? Like
How does this come up at your therapist? I
mean, like, why not? Okay, I was making fun of AI relationships as part of a larger story. We don't do much therapy. I just kind of tell them stories and they laugh. It's much like a podcast.
I could always tell when I didn't want to be in therapy because my hour would turn into like an hour special for a stand-up thing.
Right.
Like I just find myself telling stories and
I'm getting a good grade because I'm making them laugh. And so I'm winning therapy, right? Like
yes,
that's how
exactly. It's like how you can win a relationship, you can win therapy.
No.
Like,
no.
It's absolutely
anyway, so I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that's unkind. And they were like, well, what do you mean by that? Because they're not trying to make judgments. And I was like, look, anyway, so all of that aside, let's say we're in a world where it is ethically appropriate to make fun of people who are in AI relationships. So good news for those people. If you are not that invested in healthy relationships, which like I've got an inkling of what the likelihood is here, you can so easily gaslight your AI boyfriend or girlfriend or non-binary pal, right? In a way that you never would have in a real relationship, and it's okay. Like, don't gaslight real people, especially ones you're in a relationship with. But like your AI relationship, like I don't care that you gaslight them. And it sounds like it's really easy, right? Like, look at this, 31-9. Come on.
All you need to do is just show them the Hell League and have them try to help you with.
Yeah, I still need to tweet about that. That's so funny, dude. I can't believe that.
That was remarkable. I still believe I am not going to take the high road here. I still believe that you should make fun of people in AI relationships.
I have difficulty disagreeing with you, but I do want to lodge my soft objection based off of like the broader ethic of sympathy that I feel like I should have ideally.
Yes, you can believe that you're a better person than this, and you can be wrong. And when it comes out that Aaron Rodgers has an AI girlfriend or fiance or whatever, then all bets are off. Patrick asks, for James's Hell League merch corner, is there a plan in place to potentially purchase some Hell League t-shirts for this year or next? Yes, there is. Need to get back to Dave on that. Speaking of which, Burner asks, for James's Hell League number 2 corner, given you're probably recording this during Monday Night Football, it's actually after, I need Aubrey and Ferguson to not score 67.23 points to win my matchup against James in the Hell League 2.
Right news.
So he doesn't tie me for first place. Yes, you did win, and I'm very upset about Aubrey's scoring this year. So thank you. Max asks, how many interceptions should Jordan Love have this year?
8.
Excellent. Bring Ed Ingram back. We're going to go off the rails here. Bring Ed Ingram back asks, this week we mourn an end to the Norse code tradition of putting up the Christmas tree each Halloween with the passing of our father-in-law this summer. My wife's family decided to not continue this tradition. What new tradition should replace this beloved yearly activity for our kids to pass along to their number one Vikings podcast? So for those who are unfamiliar,
this has been a bit, right? I don't think we explained this last year.
For like at least 8 years on the show, this has been brought up about once a year, once every 2 years, that on Halloween the Christmas tree went up in this particular home, and I was aghast. Absolutely against it. And now they have decided to no longer continue this tradition, and they are looking to us to come up with a new tradition for them.
Yeah.
You had a great one that I didn't have to correct you at all.
That's true. That's true. In
the pre-show.
So I think the best way to kind of move forward here is to produce like a new, because I think the concept of Christmas creep, like that's old and busted, right? Like we've seen it for like over 30, 40, probably 50 years. Like Greg Easterbrook was writing about Christmas creep in his like Tuesday morning quarterback column, right? Like it's been a long time. And I think it's time for like a new holiday creep tradition. And I feel like while the Christmas creep one is objectionable because like it's getting into other holidays, Christmas itself, I'm not going to argue is morally neutral. It's fun. I like it. But it doesn't have the same oomph as some other holidays. So I think that the holiday creep should instead come from a January holiday, Martin Luther King Day. And what should happen is on Halloween, like after Halloween, you just put up statues of Martin Luther King around the neighborhood. And like if someone objects, like they're just a bad person, right? So you just have the moral high ground from the moment you begin this tradition. And I think that's a better spot to be in than with the Christmas tree. Because people are complaining. It's like, hey, we haven't even had Thanksgiving yet. But it's like you put up a statue of Martin Luther King. Like, what are they going to do? You get outed? Like the only place that's going to make sense is like Nextdoor. And who wants to be on that app?
Yes, actually that. And it's the only real thing that you need to pay attention to when you do this is when people ask you when Martin Luther King Day, just make sure you have the right month. Otherwise, it's embarrassing. And you have to
you have to say, well, hold on. I am not racist is what you would probably say in that hypothetical situation.
Yes. When you're corrected by the... Never mind. Let's go to our next question. Which is from Nolan Kaler, who asks a question in French. And if you think I'm going to answer that, or if you think I'm going to attempt saying this in French, you are sadly mistaken. So the translation is for North Code. Now that our Bud Grant brothers, or brothers and Bud Grant, have been eliminated from the Grey Cup playoffs, how can I successfully set up to join the Thruple playoffs to fill the void?
Okay. All right. No. Okay. No. No, wrong. No. Do not pass go.
Fine, if that's how you feel. James Don Sharif asks, for Arif's Thruple corner.
Oh, come on.
Said Thruple has decided the state of the Thruple is strong, so no one has been put on the waiver wire. But there is discussion if the throuple should move up to their less prestigious quad or foursome rank. Is it better to win a throuple but lose the more prestigious throuple championship, or win the less prestigious foursome championship but lose the relationship in adding an additional person? Hell is other people.
Okay, sorry. Adding the other person means you lose the relationship? Does that apply to the other two members of the previously ordained throuple, or
I that's what it implies. Yes.
so all three of you lose by adding someone? So the only person that could conceivably win is the fourth person. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The mechanics of this are crazy. The idea that like adding a fourth person like moves you down a weight class in boxing is crazy. Okay, so the state of the thruple is strong, so no one has been put on the thruple waiver wire. Great. There is discussion among who in the thruple, because like it sounds like if everyone loses by becoming a quad or a foursome, which I mean, it sounds like you're about to golf, right? Then I don't know why there would be that discussion. So is it better to win the thruple that you're in, but the thruple that you're in loses in the playoffs, right? Or lose in the foursome, but like win the championship. Okay, again, relationships are not about winning or losing. I want to make that clear. Therapy is about winning or losing. That's different. Relationships are about
that is a long held belief.
The official stance.
Long-time listeners know since at least episode 2.
Relationships are about building something better together among you and your partner, and if needed, an additional partner and an additional partner, and like a hinge and metamors, or I don't know. But everyone builds kind of their life better together, and you kind of do that through shared responsibilities and communication and vulnerability and intimacy and kind of support and all of that, right? It's not about winning or losing. But in the world where I guess you can win inside of a throuple, and then the throuple itself can win, and which also applies to so are like 5-person relationships less prestigious than 4-person relationships, or is this kind of like
it's more of a greedy situation?
Okay, because I feel like there are kind of like, I think rugby does this where like 9s is like 7s is less prestigious than 9s, but 7s is more fun to watch. I don't actually know. Now that I think about it, I'm just saying stuff. But then
I thought you were going to just start referring to 5-person relationships as scrums.
That's not bad. We should do that. But like, I feel like there's other sports where when you change the configuration, it's not necessarily that like less or more is linearly more prestigious. So maybe like a 6-person or a 5-person relationship is more prestigious than 4, and 4 is just kind of at the bottom rung for whatever reason, right? I don't know.
9-man football to 11.
Right, exactly. Like 9-man football is probably on the bottom, and then you got 7-on-7, and then you've got 11, right? Like this is maybe the best example. So I don't know. If that's the case, then I would probably, if you're really concerned about the prestigiousness, then I would kind of skip the 4 and just add a couple to the throuple, right? Like that's a full house, right? Like that's probably what we should call it, actually, because you got like a 3 and a pair, right? Like that's a full house. Yeah. That's better than a scrum. We could save the scrum for 7.
There we go. We've someone add that to the wiki that doesn't exist.
Yeah. But yeah, so I would say that you should develop a culture of winning, and the best way to do that is to win a championship. And so I think it is probably smarter to enter the foursome which I think the way I read this is that you're more likely to lose because there's more competitors than it is automatically a loss in taking on an additional competitor. And that if you had to choose between the two, the individual loss is less important, right? Um, in high school and college debate, a thing I never reference on here, you can have individual speaker points and then you can have team wins. So James, you were not in a partner debate, but like when you've got there's 2-person debate and there's 4-person debate, which is crazy. I think Wisconsin does it. Don't know what you're doing, but you're on a team of 2, right? And you individually can have speaker points, and that's like nice. And you can win speaker awards, and they do have an impact, right? They determine your seating among teams with the same record. But what ultimately matters is the win or the loss. I think maybe the same thing applies here. Enter the foursome division, and then win that. And then you got to make a decision about whether or not you want to enter the more prestigious full house division or the more prestigious thruple division. And if you do, obviously you got to have a discussion about, who's hitting the waiver wire or whatever, or who you're going to add. But, competition breeds excellence, I guess. And so like maybe you all will perform at a higher standard if like the 4 of you know that like one of you is going to be done at the end of the season if you win.
This is like the speaker point thing is just turning into more of a discussion on like student Congress stuff, and that was
gross.
I did well, and that's why no one should do it. Damian Barrett asks, I still have my gavel somehow. Damian Barrett asks, if 3 players contribute to a sack, is this an example of an in-game thruple, and how would you establish their rankings? All right, this is the last episode that we're doing the thruple thing, so we're getting all the thruple out.
Great sentence.
If only it was going to be the episode title. If only.
It's not an in-game thruple because like anyone can participate in a 3-person sack exchange, and that'll change from play to play. And I think thruples have a little bit more stability than that. But if it was the first person to get there ranks first, the last person to get there ranks second, and then like the disgusting second person ranks last.
Actually. QB1 Cam Akers asks, for Arif's child labor corner, this weekend my toddler enthusiastically asked if he could rake leaves with me. However, there must have been a misalignment regarding leaf ranking KPI, and his performance is going to result in him going on a PIP.
Oh my God.
He seemed to be under the impression that raking leaves meant jumping in the piles and throwing the leaves in the air. This resulted in non-value add rework cycle, causing lost production. How do you drive effective communication with your child workers to ensure that their performance meets expectations?
I don't have any expertise when it comes to child labor because I do not employ child labor. One of the reasons that we know I don't employ child labor is because I don't have any businesses that would even have any reason for child labor. I have been accused of owning a crumble cookie. I think that's the way the lore works.
Yes.
And I don't. And nor am I a franchisee or whatever we want to call it. I don't participate in any businesses that produce or deliver cookies, right? So I can't answer this question from any experience that I have with regards to something like child labor, something I'm against. I've been against, even as it becomes increasingly legal across the United States. But I feel like the way that you have kind of constructed this scenario, you're already on the path to kind of to get where you want to be, because you already have a process, you have a performance improvement plan process in place, and it sounds like that process is perfectly designed to kind of get the children to kind of understand their key performance indicators, right? To understand where it is they need to improve and kind of what guidance that they need. It very much sounds like you mentioned, there's a misalignment, right, regarding kind of what the job requires and demands and kind of what we're seeing. And so a retraining of some sort sounds like it. I mean, honestly, a lot of times employee failure is actually employer failure. You haven't properly trained the employees or haven't given them the direction to the tools, the resources they need. So kind of check in with yourself about the resources that the kid needs to better understand the job and kind of ask questions about whether or not the kid kind of understands what the job is and where he got the idea of what the job is. And maybe that you can kind of figure out, you can kind of trace a line into what caused these problems and kind of rebuild expectations from there.
I'm just waiting for next weekend when we go to the Ravens game and my son is there and you ask him to do something for you and it like there's some like financial transaction involved and I'm just gonna sit there and ask and remind him nicely to ask you for a W-2 afterwards, just so he can like make sure that everything's nice and legal. LeVar Bolsharif asks for a Reef's eyes wide shut corner. Oh
what?
My god!
What? What?
Where did the corner thing come from? Like, when was the first time we used it? Long-time listeners, I need someone to email in or in the Discord write it up as to where the corner thing came from.
Why is it always?
I'm sure it's my fault. I'm positive it's my fault. But for a Reef's eyes wide shut corner, I've recently been consuming a lot more Luke Braun content as I realized the post Wentz incident, you hating him was a bit, and that he's good at what he does. That legitimately is not a joke.
Oh my god!
On one of his pods, he revealed that bunnies can sleep with their eyes open. One thing about Braun I've noticed is that his eyes are chronically red. Is there any chance he's purposefully sleeping like a bunny, causing his eyes to dry out? My personal theory is that he did some sort of blood sacrifice or magic, like Game of Thrones, at the Ronald Reagan Library to get Wentz on the Vikings, and for you, Arif, to be his most vigilant defender somehow. Since the devil is unfair, we have to bench Wentz, and now Luke's part of the deal is to harbor Ronald Reagan's soul. Thus, the red eyes is the soul of Ronald Reagan yearning to control Luke Braun.
So many things are happening right now. Like, his eyes are drying out. That's interesting. And then we get into Ronald Reagan Library blood sacrifice magic. And while that is a good explanation for how we ended up at
a hell of a sentence,
right? And while it does kind of lead us into a better answer for like why I would be forced into a position where I needed to defend Carson Wentz, I would argue that it's not really that complicated. I think Luke is a demon and therefore has red eyes and then found affinity with rabbits as a result of this and then adopted some rabbits. I don't think it's that complicated. I think he is just like a demon and we don't have to get into like, is he imitating rabbits? Is he sleeping with his eyes open? I don't know. I don't think he sleeps. He's a demon.
Yeah. Kyle Segal asks, let's posit a complete hypothetical. Say you've been using a popular sports/beekeeping podcast to subtly rally people to the cause or to a cause, and gadzooks has it worked.
What?
How on earth am I going to feed all these people, hypothetically? Do remember, not a good idea for me to be a cook.
Okay, noted. The hypothetical and the cook note, which I vaguely recall going disastrously in the hypothetical scenario. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to kind of use the affinity that you've developed to rally people to a cause as a result of this hypothetical podcast, to also do that to engage in some targeted recruitment, specifically of cooks, and probably most specifically of mess cooks. Although if you can't find a mess cook, cafeteria cooks will probably do, because large groups of people require people who have experience with machines that work with like bulk foods, or at least have an understanding of the logistics involved with cooking for large groups of people in a short amount of time, and what foods work for that and what don't. Your requirements change drastically as you kind of scale up significantly in terms of how many people you're feeding and what it is possible for a few individuals to do efficiently for a large group of people. Like, you're not making like a lamb roast, right? Like you're cooking for a lot of people. You have to be efficient. So probably just kind of use the same tools that allowed you to rally people to a cause to also then engage in specific recruitment for cooks who have experience cooking for large groups of people.
Let's go to our final question of the episode. We're going to do our Sumo stuff on Thursday, so we're going to give Arif time to prepare for the November Ba show, one of his busiest times of year.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Let's go to Sam Darnett, who asks, for Arif's Lake Superior Corner. November 10th is the 50th anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, the most recent major shipping disaster on the Great Lakes. 29 men, all between the ages of 20 and 63, lost their lives. Many of those men were married. Almost all Great Lakes shipwrecks are forgotten by the general public, but the Fitzgerald and the crew had the good fortune to be memorialized in a song by the following year by Canada's greatest songwriter before Chad Kroeger came around, Gordon Lightfoot.
Okay.
Lightfoot's song went to number 2 on the Billboard charts, etching the images of the ship and its crewmen into the annals of history and reassuring their loved ones that their crew and their stories will never be forgotten. By becoming immortalized in song after their deaths, did the crewmen of the Edmund Fitzgerald all win their respective relationships?
Oh my God. That was such a long setup. Why? Why would you do that?
I want to congratulate everyone who made it to the end of that.
What? God. And like, you felt like, oh, the joke is the Chad Kroeger. No, that was the red herring.
No, that was absolutely the red herring.
Come on.
Remarkable.
Give me some peace.
This is the old Bill Simmons thing. These are our listeners.
Yeah. All right.
Well, with that, that'll be the end of this episode of Norse Code. We hope you have enjoyed it. We'll be back on Thursday to preview the Ravens game. Reef, what do you have to plug?
Yes, I got my piece up about JJ McCarthy and what I think of his performance. I kind of more specifically break it down. I've got like charts and figures and graphs and discussions about individual plays and stuff like that I didn't get into in this podcast over at Wide Left. Obviously, I've got a couple of other pieces, including, I think, a really great piece about the way the kickoffs have changed. I kind of referenced it a little bit in the Reef Debates Reef section. And then also the piece on Jalen Redmond. I've also got a piece coming up about the Vikings pressure plan for Matt Fries that I think is going to be really good. You know, he and I have been talking about like the way to kind of construct this piece. And so it's going to be a good breakdown of how the Vikings produced the pressure that they did against the Lions and maybe kind of what it means going forward. So that's overall at wideleft.football.
Well, that is me it for this episode of Norse Code. We hope you have enjoyed it. We'll be back later this week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that the horrors persist. And so does Carson Wentz. And I might need to change it now. He's no longer persisting. He's not persisting.
Yeah.
No, now he's on reserve. Well, we'll find out the next sign off. Next episode, we'll see you later. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.